takes to remember how to interact with people in person. Board Game Blitz is sponsored by Gray Fox Games. This week, we're talking about board game conventions. First, we discuss a couple games we've played recently, like Funny Pages, The Search for Planet X, and Jackpot Payout. Then, we discuss how we think board game conventions will be different going forward. And now, here are your hosts,
Ambie
and Crystal. For those of you who are not aware, we just celebrated our 5th podiversary!
Woohoo!
Yes, we have been podcasting for 5 full years now, which is a little bit hard to believe at times that it's been that long. But in celebration of our 5-year anniversary, our sponsor, Gray Fox Games, is offering up a couple of really awesome prizes to you guys, our listeners. So, we're doing a giveaway. All you have to do to enter is send an email with the subject line popcorn. And the reason for that is it's a random word. There's no reason for that. So don't try and read into it. But popcorn needs to be the subject line by itself. And in the body of the email, you're going to tell us 2 things. You're going to tell us your favorite thing about the podcast and a topic that you would like Ambie and I to discuss in the future. And are we trying to look for new ideas for podcast themes? Yes, that we are. And we're not ashamed to say so because after 5 years, sometimes it's tough. If you want to get a bonus entry into the contest, in that same email, include a screenshot of a review that you have written about our podcast for one of the random podcast apps, whichever one you happen to use. If you've written us a review, whether that was 3-4 years ago or yesterday, take a screenshot of that review and send it to us. Just because we like knowing that people are interacting with our podcast on the podcast apps. So what can you win, you may be asking yourself? Well, we have 2 awesome prizes available thanks to Gray Fox Games. One of those is a family game night bundle that includes copies of 3 different games, Draw Your Own Conclusions, Zoned Out, and Feelinks. You'll get all 3 of those games. The other prize is a Kickstarter pledge for After the Empire. So the thing about this one is because it is delivering from the Kickstarter, it will not get to you for about 6 months because that Kickstarter has not fulfilled yet. So if you want to get the Kickstarter bundle for this After the Empire, it will be a little while, but you can still win a copy. So thank you to Gray Fox for sponsoring our giveaway and for sponsoring our show for all these years.
Yay! So recently I got to play a lot of games because...
Oh my gosh, you sound and look so happy and I love it.
Yes. Yeah, so we have some friends who are fully vaccinated and we're fully vaccinated, so we got to get together and play games. Yeah, it was hard to pick a game to talk about, but I'm actually talking about 2 things today. One of them is a puzzle type thing, and the other one's a game that I played that I really liked. So, firstly, I got a review copy of Funny Pages from the Enigma Emporium. The copy that I got is a promo pack, it's not the actual game. So, Funny Pages is a puzzle in the form of a comic strip. You've heard me talk about Enigma Emporium before. They did these puzzle postcards, which were like ciphers and puzzles in postcards, and I've reviewed them before. They were difficult for me because I'm not that great at ciphers, but I still enjoyed them. But Funny Pages are puzzles in a comic panel. So it's one panel per puzzle, or one puzzle, I guess, per comic. And each comic, the answer is a day of the week. So you have like a structure to the puzzle and you know kind of what you're going for. So it's easier than the puzzle postcards that I've done previously and easier to get into. So I got a promo pack of 7 puzzles. The actual game is going to be on Kickstarter, I believe, and it's going to be like a whole month of puzzles, so like I guess 30 or something, plus meta puzzles to put them all in order, because I guess they're going to be the days of the month or something. I did all 7 of them. I actually did them on stream, and for some of the puzzles I got by myself. Some of them the chat helped me, and some of them I needed to ask for hints on Facebook. So you can actually do these puzzles yourself on their Facebook page. If you look up the Funny Pages from Enigma Emporium, they have a Facebook page and they respond if you message them asking for hints.
That's
but
really
they
cool.
Yeah, they have all of the promo pack puzzles there, so you can check to see if that's like what you like. They're all different types of puzzles, because like some of them like worked really well with how I think, and some of them I didn't really understand until I got a hint, and then it's like, oh, okay. And all of them also, the art styles are different too, so they look like different comic strips, even though they're all named the same comic strip, because like they have this fake comic strip name. Oh, and then like for the actual physical part of the strip, I was expecting it to be like not great quality because it's just like a Funny Pages newspaper, but it was on this nice linen finish cardstock, and it was big, like half a sheet of paper size.
Ooh, that's
so
cool.
Yeah, that was pretty nice. But yeah, you can go check out Funny Pages, check out their Facebook to see the puzzles, to see if that's something that you would like, and then they're going to be kickstarting soon, I think. I'm not sure when, but if you follow them on Facebook, they'll announce it. So that was Funny Pages from the Enigma Emporium. And then for board games, I got to play The Search for Planet X, which is a 2020 board game designed by Matthew O'Malley and Ben Rossett. This is a deduction game where you're trying to locate Planet X. So on the board, there's a bunch of segments on the board, and like in each segment, there's different things. It's either empty space or like an asteroid or a comet or different things. And then one of them has Planet X. And each type of thing has different rules, like asteroid has to be next to another asteroid, and Planet X can't be next to a dwarf planet, and the dwarf planet has to be next to something, or like, I don't remember all the rules, but there's certain rules, and then there's an app that goes with it. And we were talking about this last episode, how apps can help with deduction games. And yes,
they really
definitely helps in the Search for Planet X, because you set up the game, and there's different difficulty levels too. Like they can give you different amounts of information at the start depending on which difficulty you do. And each player can pick a different difficulty too. So you can get like a handicap in the same game, which is
really
neat. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah. And then the board itself has different difficulties. Like there's one that only has 12 sectors and one that has 18, I think. So that would be for everyone in the game. Yeah. So the way you're playing is you can only see half of the board at a time, and you're scanning the sectors or targeting a sector or like researching. And so when you research, that gives you some other rules. So each game has, the game has base logic rules, and then each game in the app has like separate logic rules that you have to research to learn. So you learn more logic rules within the game. And then the app tells you like, you can scan certain sectors, and like, I scan sectors 1 through 5, and it's like, okay, there's 2 asteroids in that if you're scanning for asteroids or something. So then you're like doing all this and doing deduction, and you have to locate where Planet X is. But it's not just that, because you can publish theories too. So like during the game, you're going to be publishing theories about like, oh, I think sector 5 has an asteroid. And there's like a timer thing. You put that face down, and then when it gets to after 3 turns or something, it flips over. And if you're right, then you're going to get points for that. And if someone else like also guessed right, they get points as well. But then everyone gets that information now, because they see that you guessed right, and now they know what it is.
Interesting.
So you get points for that, but then you also give away information. So you're getting points for doing those small deductions during the game, but then also finding Planet X at the end. So that was very fun. I like deduction games, and the app works really well with it. This is one where like my friend was explaining how it works to me, and I'm like, oh, I like this game, like during the explanation.
I love it when you can tell that quickly. When somebody, I mean, it was like that when you described Rosetta to me. I literally was like, yeah, that's my favorite game. Like, that's going to be up there. Like, how could I have not, Like, yeah, it's great when you know that quickly. You're like, oh, this game is my jam.
Yeah. It's not going to be my favorite game, but it's pretty good. Yes.
And Rosetta, I don't think is my favorite game either, but it's up there pretty high, I can imagine.
But yeah, that's the Search for Planet X.
Awesome. Yeah, that one's been on my like radar for a little while. Like I'm curious about it. So I definitely want to try that one out, especially now that I like awkward guests so much. I'm finding, because I used to not like deduction, but then I played Cryptid and I was bad at it, but I liked it. And I played awkward guests and I liked that. So I think I just need deduction games that have more structure to them. Like, I guess, I don't know. I'm still bad at Clue, so I'm never going to be good at Clue. All right, well, the game I'm talking about is also similarly to Funny Pages, not quite released yet. It's coming to Kickstarter soon. It's called Jackpot Payout. The cool thing about this game, for those of you who have been listening to the podcast for a little while, if you remember, Ambie and I used to do an alliteration puzzle at the end of every episode. Those alliteration puzzles were inspired and written by Chip Beauvais, and this game is actually designed by Chip. So that's a pretty cool little fact. It's going to be published by Puzzling Pixel Games. Games, and it is a light deck building game where each player has their own slot machine that they are going to be using their cards to fill in the reels of, hoping to score jackpots. So in your starting deck, you only have a couple of each symbol. So the grapes and the cherries and the crowns, you only have a couple of each one. And so you can't score a jackpot very easily right away because you have to get 3 matching symbols in the reels on your board as you play cards from your deck to score a jackpot. So every time you play cards out, you get to pick up new cards from the display, and depending on if you have a matching pair on your board, it will allow you to potentially pick up more powerful cards that have multiple symbols on them or special powers on them, which will help you build up your deck, make it easier to get jackpots, or to make it easier to acquire even better cards going forward. You can also add in wilds to your deck, although the goal is to score jackpots, and those wilds won't help you too much except for just the scoring of the jackpot itself, because what you're trying to do when you score those jackpots is get coins, and the wilds generally do not have coins printed on them. So you only score the number of coins that's on the cards that are part of the jackpot. So whenever you score a jackpot, you take the coins, and then all 3 cards get immediately removed from your deck. So if you get some really cool, powerful cards, that's awesome, but if they score a jackpot, then they get removed from your deck. So it's this interesting dance and balance where in a lot of deck building games, you're not culling cards quite as frequently, but in this game, you're potentially removing cards from your deck frequently, so your deck is very dynamic and changing, which is kind of neat. The game doesn't last super long either. As far as deck building games go, this is definitely lighter weight, more approachable than a lot of deck building games because there aren't a lot of complex rules. It's fairly simple. And the game ends when either the pool of available coins runs out, which is based on the player count, or when one player has 6 or fewer cards left in their deck, which, when you're scoring those jackpots and removing 3 cards at a time, is possible, but it's more likely that the bank of coins will run out first. My friends and I had fun playing this. Like, deck building games are not always my jam. I really enjoy games like Clank, where it's deck building, but also other stuff. Pure deck building games like Dominion have generally not been my thing, but this game is light enough and the theme is really interesting that I actually really enjoyed it. I mean, I live here in Vegas, so when they reached out to me and they were like, hey, do you want to try our new deck building game that's based on slot machines? I was like, that sounds really interesting. I like games with different, unique themes, and this one is cool. I think this one, if you like deck building games a lot, like you just love deck building games, this would be a good, almost a filler weight deck building game for your collection. Or if you want to introduce deck building as a mechanism to people who are less experienced with hobby games, this would be a really good way to do it. Because even, like, everybody, even if you don't gamble, you're familiar with what a slot machine is. And it's really easy to be like, oh, just flip up the first 3 cards of your deck and put them on your board. Like, it's very simple to explain. Mm-hmm. People don't have to do a lot of complex stuff. So I think that this one is really neat. It is hitting Kickstarter as of now on June 8th, assuming nothing changes for them leading up to that date. So I think if you're looking for a light deck building game, you should definitely give Jackpot Payout from Puzzling Pixel Games a glance.
Cool.
Ambie, since it is our 5th anniversary, you suggested something that I thought was a really neat idea, and you said, what if we went back and talked about the same topic that we talked about in episode 1? And then we realized that the topic that you and Cassidy and I talked about in episode 1 was board game conventions.
Yep.
And at first glance, considering we are still in the middle of a global pandemic, that seemed like maybe not the best decision. But upon further reflection, I actually thought it would be neat for us to talk about what we think will be different or new or what will change in regard to board game conventions going forward. I know not everybody, we're not going to dwell necessarily on the pandemic itself, but I think large group gatherings for the foreseeable future aren't going to look the same as they always have. And how do we think that is going to affect the board game community? It could, and we could even spin this off into game night, meetup type things too, but it's board game conventions specifically, like, it's hard for me to picture 100,000 people, like going to Essen or however many, like, that's hard to imagine right now. And So, like, what are your thoughts immediately? Like, what do you think of when you think, like, there are some conventions scheduled for the fall. We don't know for sure what the first big convention is going to be right now. But, like, what do you think that's going to look like when the first quote-unquote big one happens?
Well, I know Gen Con is happening, right?
Yes.
I don't know when that is.
Right now, Gen Con, Origins, BGG Con, PAX Unplugged... Like, there's a whole bunch of conventions that are all happening in the span of, like, 3 months, I think. Like, or 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, convention season, the end of convention season. Huh? Like,
since normally some of those conventions would have happened earlier in the year, and they got moved. And I'm guessing that most of those are going to go off in the fall now. Like, I'm thinking that they're going to happen.
Probably.
But they're not going to look the way they used to.
Yeah, they're probably going to be smaller, and... With all of the digital conventions that happened this last year, I know people were talking about having like more digital options or like the possibilities of having digital and physical conventions, but that seems really difficult from a organizing standpoint because like being able to have have like physical conventions but then also be like streaming so that people can be participating virtually is very difficult if there's a lot of people and you need all of that bandwidth with the internet and stuff.
Oh yeah, that's the logistics of doing such a thing. I mean, Gen Con is doing it. Gen Con is doing technically 3 different things because they're doing the physical convention, the digital convention, and like pop-up events at game stores of some kind. Okay. Yeah, like
but then having like all the personnel for all of that too, like
Gen Con is one of the few organizations that like has the staff to pull something like that off.
Yeah. So that'll be interesting to see how that works, and it would be really neat if having it be also virtual and like the pop-ups that opens it up to more people. So that's cool. But yeah, for the smaller big conventions, like I guess BGG and Dice Tower Con, like those, they're not going to have a Gen Con staff to be able to do things like that.
Right.
It takes all of their manpower to just do the physical convention. So yeah, I don't know. I guess eventually it will come back to having a lot of people, but I don't know like how, like if that's going to be in the fall this year or like next year. Because for me, I'm personally not going to many conventions because of other reasons, but I want to.
Right. Yeah. Gosh. What was the last convention that you got to go to?
Dice Tower Con in 2019.
Okay, so it's been almost 2 years for you. Mm-hmm. Which, is understandable when you have twins.
Yeah, we actually want to go to Dice Tower West in 2022.
Yay!
Like we might be able to do that. We don't know. We need to practice traveling.
I mean, that makes sense to me. Traveling with it'll be two 2-year-olds at that point. That sounds like a handful, to say the least.
Yeah. But what do you think conventions are going to look like?
So there's a couple things that I like. I definitely think hand sanitizer has already existed at conventions. I think there will be more of a focus on hand washing and hand sanitizing in like general. I think that'll be in more places and easier to get to. I hope, this is a personal thing for me, I hope that mask wearing is still encouraged, even if it isn't required, only because, well, not only because, but primarily because the thing that we've all been talking about and dealing with for literal years, like forever, is con crud. Like, everybody knows that con crud exists, and after a convention, a bunch of people inevitably get sick, usually with a bad cold or the flu or whatever random bug happens to be getting passed around. So, like, in my mind, if I'm going to be around a crowd of people, I kind of want to just wear my mask. Not just because of COVID, but like, hey, guess what? This past year, I didn't get sick at all. Because, like, I don't remember what the numbers are exactly, so I apologize if I get this wrong. But in the United States, the number of flu cases that happen annually in a typical year, I want to say is in the, like, hundreds of thousands. Like, it's a lot of flu cases.
Yeah.
And this past year, Again, I
It's
hope
like
I get
almost
this right.
eradicated, I think.
It was literally like 4,000. And that wasn't deaths. That was just cases. Like, how bananas is that? That, like, wearing masks and social distancing and all of that, like, I mean, it's not bananas. It makes perfect sense. But, you know, like, it just seems silly to think that, like, why weren't we kind of doing that all along? Like, if you're sick, wear a mask. It's like people overseas have been doing this for years.
I know, yeah.
So I do hope that, like, mask wearing is more common, especially if you aren't feeling well. Like, if you're not feeling great, like, put a freaking mask on, just in case. It's not gonna hurt anything. I also imagine that there will be specific types of events that won't happen anymore. Like, the things that I'm thinking of probably are... So the thing that you and I both loved at BGG Con, that big dexterity game area, you know, that's kind of like this big open space where, like, people can just walk up and try random games. I'm wondering if things like that will still be around. I know that, like, the virus, at least COVID specifically, isn't as prevalent on hard surfaces, but also, like, if you do need to go and disinfect stuff, those things are kind of harder, I would imagine, to keep clean. So,
but I mean, the board games themselves are also...
That's true.
Like
even
the board
just,
game
like,
library.
So do you think board game libraries will change at all?
I don't know. Maybe they'll have like hand sanitizer at the entrance to the library or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and like, I know in some like businesses, specific items get quarantined for a certain amount of time after somebody has used them. So I wonder, in theory, if board game libraries would do something similar or need to do something similar, where like when a game gets checked back in, maybe it doesn't immediately go back on the shelf again. I don't know. I have no idea scientifically if that would even really help. But like, it's the kind of thing that I wonder if convention organizers are even like considering or thinking about at this point. It's like, not even just, you know, like, will this make a difference? Not just that, but will this help put people at ease? Because the more things the convention organizers do and are thoughtful about, I think the more comfortable people like you and I would potentially be in coming into those spaces. Like, they're really, like, they're going above and beyond, you know, they're doing stuff that really, probably they don't even need to do, but clearly they're taking this seriously. I think that would make me feel a little bit better, potentially, even if it isn't necessary.
Yeah. Like, it'll make you feel safer if they're taking safety precautions.
Right. I mean, yeah, like, for me, like, if a board game convention doesn't have a code of conduct, that's always kind of been a red flag. And so for me, if they don't have procedures or practices in place to help mitigate the risk of, you know, virus spreading, like, that to me would also be a red flag, at least at this point. I hope that we reach a point where this stuff doesn't, you know, isn't as necessary anymore, obviously. But and obviously a lot of people are getting vaccinated, which is awesome. If people are able to, you should definitely get the vaccine. But I also know there are people for, you know, various medical reasons who can't get the vaccine if they have autoimmune diseases or things like that. And so those are the people that I really worry about. Like, they need to eventually, hopefully, be able to come into these spaces too. And so those of us who can help protect them need to do so. So what do you think about, like, crowd size, spacing, like, things like that? Because obviously board games are a social thing where you are sitting in close proximity to potentially strangers. And then in the past, especially at, like, well, shoot, all of these events, like, often some of those spaces are packed to the gills with people. Like, if something's getting breathed into the air, you know about it. Like, if somebody had a garlic sandwich for lunch, you know about it. Like, you know? That
I can't imagine being in a space like that right now.
Right? Like, I'm picturing, it's weird. You'd think I would go to Gen Con first, but BGG Con is actually the thing that enters my brain. That one, at the old venue, because I didn't go to BGG Con after it moved, at the old venue, that one, like, main room where they had, like, some of the, like, hot games set up, and then, like, all of the tables were just filled all the time. Like, it was just wall-to-wall people constantly.
Yeah. And Gen Con, like, the event,
oh, yeah. The exhibitor hall.
Yeah, exhibitor hall. Yeah, that's very packed. Like, you
literally can't walk 2 inches without bumping into somebody in a normal year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, I mean, even if attendance is lowered, either by choice or just by the fact that less people are going to want to go, how the conventions will enforce potential social distancing is definitely going to be tricky.
Could they have like limits on the number of people in a room, maybe?
I mean, that kind of feels like what would be best, but I do like having, you know, the people on the ground to enforce those things will be difficult, because if you're the first person that they say, oh no, you can't come in right now, you know that some people are going to get upset about that.
Yeah. So I know, like, for the flea markets at Dice Tower Con, they would limit the number of people in there, right? But that's just one event. So if you're doing it for the whole, like, exhibit hall or the whole convention room, that would be, upsetting for the people waiting in line.
I guess the gist of all of this for me is that my hope is that both convention organizers and convention attendees will just be a little bit more thoughtful about their own behavior and the other people around them.
Yeah.
You know, we all tend to have moments where we get busy or distracted or whatever else, and like you kind of forget that other people exist. And I think that hopefully more people will be like, okay, I need to pay more attention to what's going on. Like, I can't just like barrel through the Gen Con hall and bump into whoever. Like, I need to, that's crowded over there. I'll check out that booth later. Let me go to this other thing and not run for the new hotness. Although I hope they also kind of do away with that to some degree. Like, I don't want publishers like doing things that encourage people to behave badly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That mad rush for whatever hot game that only has X number of copies. Although, shoot, that's going to be really difficult for publishers, because how many copies of a game do you bring to a convention has always been something very difficult for them to kind of suss out, because you really don't know. Like, all it takes is one person kind of spreading the word about a thing, and all of a sudden it's the hotness and everybody wants it. But if you bring too much inventory to a convention, I know that can be really expensive to like bring the games in and have to ship them back.
Yeah, they don't want to ship them back.
No, I do not envy publishers who have to make that judgment call about like how many games they're gonna bring, because then like sometimes you do accidentally create a scarcity of something without necessarily intending to,
and then everyone gets mad at you.
Yeah, they really do. People get, and it's so funny because I think if anybody paused for a few seconds and thought about that piece of it, like, how do they know to how many games to bring? How, like, do you think publishers could release some kind of a Google form or something similar where they just like could gauge interest in their new titles? Like, hey, these are the games we're releasing at Gen Con. Are you attending Gen Con? Yes or no? Do you plan on buying a copy of this game? Yes or no?
I feel like some publishers do that, right? Or they have like pre-orders where you can pick it up there, and then they also...
Ooh, yeah. Oink Games did that. Oink Games does pre-orders for some of their games.
And then they also bring extra ones, because not everyone sees the pre-order thing, and then
But that actually might be smarter for other publishers to pick up, is that pre-order system. So like you can gauge a little more accurately what the interest level is going to be. And then if other people get interested and miss out, at least they had the opportunity theoretically.
Yeah. I think to have it like work well, it would have to work with the actual convention, and have the convention send out to all of the attendees so that you know that the attendees saw it.
That's a good point. So yeah, working in theory, this might work better with like smaller conventions, whereas some of the larger ones, I think that would be difficult to facilitate. But technically, if the convention wanted to, they could reach out to all of the people who are exhibiting and say, do you want to be included in this pre-order form? And literally, they could send out one giant form with the games that each exhibitor is like, okay, this is what we have available for pre-order.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, that could theoretically work.
Now we're just trying to organize a convention.
I mean, it's funny because I help a little bit with Dice Tower West, so like...
It's gonna happen?
I know. I'm not in charge of that piece of things. Like our retail area, the publishers, like that's not my responsibility. But it's something I could theoretically suggest. Our retail retail buying games isn't as big of a deal at Dice Tower West. Like we have retail available. We have publishers there, but it isn't like as much of the focus as it is at a convention like Gen Con. So, well, this is a fun topic. We've talked about conventions a handful of times throughout the past, and I think it's a discussion that we'll definitely have more in the future. Needless to say, I don't think I'm going to any conventions in the near future, but I'm really excited to go to one again eventually.
Next year. And that's it for this week's Board Game Blitz. Visit our website, boardgameblitz.com, for video and blog content, as well as to get links to all our social media pages. This episode was sponsored by Grey Fox Games. Just in case you don't win After the Empire Night contest, you can still grab a copy for yourself on GameFound now. And if you want to get some other amazing Grey Fox games at a discount, just use the code BGBLITZ21 at checkout. They are offering Blitzketeers 20% off non-exclusive items on their website. Grey Fox Games. Quality games cleverly crafted. Join the Blitzketeer community on Discord by following the link in the show notes. You can support the show by leaving us a rating and review on your podcast provider. And if you want behind-the-scenes access and an invite to our private Slack channel, visit patreon.com/BoardGameBlitz. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Morrow. Technical support provided by Toby Mount. Board Game Blitz is part of the Dice Tower Network. Until next time, share with me your fave game. Why don't you share with me your fave game? Share with me your fave game. Let's play it today. Bye, everyone.
Bye. First. My friends and I had fun playing this. Like, deck building games are not generally my...
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I was like, I can hold it together. It's good.